What are industry leaders looking for before reopening the economy? And how severe has the coronavirus pandemic been for business operations? Joining us now, SnapOns Chairman and CEO Nick Pinchuk. Nick, thanks for being with us today.
It's my pleasure. Good to talk to you.
All right. As a major employer, you've got operations around the country and around the world, tens of thousands of employees and associates. And I realize that some of your production lines, some of your operations have continued as essential businesses in the midst of this pandemic. But what do you want to see? What is going to give you confidence to feel like the economy can return to normal, business can return to normal, and you can keep your workers truly safe?
Well, I think we're keeping our workers safe. I mean, all our factories in the United States are open because we're, as you say, we're essential. We serve the military and the transportation system, how you get your groceries and critical transportation. And even in Europe, for example, the London ambulance service keeps calling our people to say, are you going to be able to deliver your products? So we're essential, which is why we have our factories open. We try to keep our workers safe. It's one of the things we think about in terms of distancing. One of the things about factories today is we've kind of improved it. So workers are working in 3 or 4 different machines, and so they're very far apart to begin with. Those that have to get together, we give PPE. So we think we're safe, and we deep clean every time. So I think the workers are in a safe position.
It's interesting to hear you say that. I mean, given the fact that you do supply so many tools, so much equipment to so many different end markets, and you are deemed essential in this time, what are you seeing in terms of the business mix? What has that demand looked like? Have there been places where there's been weakness, and have there been places where it's been stable?
Well, it's certainly stable with emergency services like the military or truck transportation. Things like the airlines can be down a little bit. You can see that. I mean, you can look at it in the United States and in Europe. It changes from place to place, of course. New York, people are sheltering in place a little bit more, and people are driving quite as much. Other places is different. One of the interesting thing about this, and I think that people have, not quite understood, is the business model when you're essential is pretty robust. It's one of the reasons why we've been able to pay a dividend every quarter since 1939, and we've never reduced it because it tends to keep up. Now, it isn't that we've been impacted. The other thing I think that people haven't thought about is this. This is the time for the workers. You see, what they're working on is essential. And many of them, car mechanics or welders, think of themselves, and we think of them as having settled for the consolation prize of our society. But when the days are darkest, those are the people we depend on. They've enlisted an American calling, and they feel that. So sometimes people ask me, how are the morale of the workers? I think it's pretty good because they've demonstrated how very important they are for our society.
It's such a key point that you make there, and I wonder what that means in terms of how you're approaching the workers. Does that mean that you are not only not furloughing workers but potentially hiring? Does it mean that you're taking a look at things like bonuses and other? Mm-hmm.
Well, we're not hiring right now because, of course, we're impacted like everybody else with the virus. But I'll tell you this: one of the things about it is we think of our workers, our team, as essential as our brand or our product. So whatever we do going forward, wherever this goes, we're going to consider the preservation of that great advantage highly as we configure ourselves in the weeks and months ahead. One of the things I would say about this is, it's been less than a month since the first shelter-in-place order. New York was probably March 22nd. So we're not going to take any precipitous actions based on just 3 or 4 weeks of data. We hold on to that workforce as much as we can. Now, that doesn't mean we're never going to furlough or we're never going to take reductions. But one of the problems is, I think, one of the disadvantages of saying your workforce is important is on occasion you have to act like it. And we plan to act like it when we go forward.
Nick, it's Dominic Chu here. I'm wondering, you talked about when the days are darkest. I hearken back to maybe a couple years ago when we were talking about the U.S.-China trade war and the fact that manufacturing was such a huge focus. Do you think that this crisis right now has cast a very big spotlight on the U.S. manufacturing sector, the industry group? And do you think that the manufacturing in America will change and evolve and be perhaps more valued in the coming years because of the strategic importance of making some things domestically here to solve our own problems and take care of our own?
I know that I will be trying to make that case, and I know that the National Association of Manufacturers has tried to make that case for a long time. The thing is, in America, in some ways, we have lost the respect for the pride and dignity of work. What Snap-on does is call on 1 million technicians who ply their trade every day and take pride in what they do. And in fact, this has never been more clear and important to us. You can read books about it in World War II. Arthur Herman's The Freedom's Forge, or Paul Kennedy's Engineers of Victory, how the workers created the substrate which allowed us to win the one war we couldn't afford to lose. This is the same kind of thing. We're protecting the common defense, and manufacturers are working on that right now.
Yeah, and I got to think that this is going to be a longer-term trend that we see, not just within your company, but within manufacturing more broadly, and how supply chains are thought about as we come out of this pandemic. Lastly, along those lines, in terms of longer-term trends that could take root here, do you think this is going to accelerate the adoption on factory floors of things like automation, 3D printing, some of these newer technologies?
Well, I think people have been adopting it in our factories, and we're just simple tool makers. We have in some of our factories 1 robot for every 4 people, and we're moving it along. But in that time, even as we've added robots, we haven't reduced our workforce because it's improving the complexity and the variety of our product lines. So I think people will always adopt new technologies. I don't know how much it's going to change. I think people have talked about working from home. Well, I think maybe some of that will occur, but I doubt if you will broadcast from home when the crisis goes away. I think, for example, people may actually be worried more about, do I want to be in tight places? Do I want to be in cities? Do I want to be in rideshare? Should I drive more? That's what's happened in Beijing. Beijing has started to drive. They snapped right back in terms of their driving in Shanghai because people don't want to drive mass transit. That may change in some ways. That's a positive. I think to get out of this, just like in the last recession, what drove the last recession, I believe, was the psychology. Everybody got up every day and got bad news for breakfast. The bad news for breakfast stops. The recession snaps back.
Nick Pinchuk, Snap-on CEO, thank you for joining us today.